everyone, and welcome to the Community Reinvestment Alliance of Florida podcast, the Just Economy podcast. Welcome back for another podcast. We got a great guest this morning. We'll be getting to him shortly, but before we get to him, we want to make a few announcements. First of all, as you well know, this is the Just Economy podcast, building a just economy for Florida, and we will work to provide different viewpoints, different ideas, and different suggestions to make our economy better, to make our people better, and to make our communities better. So this morning, we have a great guest. And by the way, my name is Cornell Cruz Jr. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Reinvestment Alliance of Florida and your host for the Just Economy podcast. We have a great guest he's actually head of policy at the NCRC. His name is Dedrick Asante-Muhammad. Very smart gentleman. I depend on him a lot for the work that has to be done in the community and how we can better frame it. And we're going to have a very deep discussion this morning about several items, and most importantly, the racial wealth gap. So, Dedrick, I want to welcome you. Thank you for coming on. I want to move us on to Black home ownership.
Yes, sir.
And that still sticks in my craw today. The way Black home ownership is done, and even when we do have the opportunity, even when we do have opportunities to purchase, we still got to worry about the bias by appraisers. We still got to worry about that. So, but Black home ownership, according to you, skyrocketed, increased to 38% in 1960 to 44% in 2021, with an increase of 6% for white home ownership. Has increased to 64% in the 1960s to 74% in 2021. In over 60 years, there's not been a bridging of the black-white home ownership divide. So I'm interested on your thoughts on, one, even after the Fair Housing Act, it seems like, especially after the 80s, and this goes back to what you said prior about those protections as well as those policies and laws that were put in place, it was almost like, okay, they got enough, stop them right here. Like, we can't get them, let them go any further. At least that's how it feels. You know, I could be wrong, but that's how it feels. So I was interested to get your take on black ownership and how it blew up at one time until now, where we haven't really gained anything over the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah, and I think we had hit almost a high in 1980, right, at around 46% black home ownership. And honestly, it's gone up at points, but then it goes back down. And we're still around that 46, we can get up to 48% home ownership rate. So really, we saw some growth in the 1960s. I mean, and again, we saw growth from all people saw massive growth in home ownership between 1940 onward, right? Where we actually kind of moved from, you had to almost have all the money up front to buy a home, to a 30-year mortgage, FHA, all of these ways to allow people with minimum down payment to get a home. But we have not been successful in having a home ownership a strong home ownership increase that disproportionately reaches African Americans. And as a stat, you just noted that we've seen most recently that whites are increasing home ownership at a larger percentage level than blacks, right? Where whites are almost at a 74% home ownership rate, right? While blacks are still below 50%. We, in a separate report, did a paper trying to analyze or estimate how long it would take for blacks just to get a 60% home ownership rate. And we put forth that roughly African Americans, new black homeowners, would have to double and maintain that for almost 20 years for African Americans just to hit 60%. That's not even equality with whites. And why, and home ownership is so important because it is the number one source of wealth for most middle income Americans. And this would be an important way for African Americans to develop some type of economic security. So, I think that is, and that sits right in the portfolio of what NCRC does. Advancing black homeownership, I think, is essential to helping to address racial economic inequality and the racial wealth divide in particular.
So let's expound on that a little bit because I've heard several African American, for lack of a better word, philosophers talk about that we should we should move away or look at alternatives to building generational wealth as far as purchasing a home. That we should look at alternatives like stock market and things of this nature. And my pushback always with them, and I always ask the question, okay, if that's the case, then you need to explain to me why corporate America is buying up all the homes, all the single family homes in this country. You need to explain that to me. If that's what you say is we need to look at alternatives, and those alternatives are not conducive to what we need to do to build generational wealth when owning a house is, especially even the general population, blacks, whites, Hispanics, whatever. The general population, less than 40% of the general population invests in the stock market. And most of those are done through pension plans, right? So I guess my question to you is what do you say to those that say we as African Americans need to look at alternatives to building generational wealth through buying a home?
Well, I mean, a simple way of addressing it is that you can't live in your stock portfolio, right? Like you have to live somewhere. And the question is, are you going to live in a place that you're renting and the rent can go up every year? You might need to move. There is no return on that investment. Or is it more financially ideal to live in a place that you actually can own and that will, though it does go up a small amount, averages maybe even only 1% a year, you know, though the housing market's gone up a lot recently, it's still, you're getting a return on your money versus your money just going out the window. Now, you know, the reality is, you're right, if you invest in a stock, like I say, an index fund, you're more likely to get a stronger returns on that than just a home. But the issue again is you can't take your rent money and put it in stocks.
Agreed.
You got to pay your living. So that's why for most middle income Americans who don't have a lot of extra money once they pay their living expenses, their food bill, their clothing, transportation, at least let your your housing expenses have some type of return. And that is how it build wealth. So that, you know, that is why home ownership is so important. And I'll add a little bit more to the critics. And it's also true that blacks get less of a return on homes in predominantly black neighborhoods than whites do on theirs, but still it's a return. And still it is better than getting no return at all. So, you know, wealth building it depends where you are. But I think if majority of African Americans aren't homeowners at all, it would be very important for more of us to become homeowners. Then when you can have continued extra income, yes, put that in investments and these types of things.
I totally agree. I'm with you. Like I said, I love to go to those seminars or those talks and do that pushback because I just think that you know when the top 20 corporations stop investing in homes and buying up single family homes, then I'm with you. I guess my other question is, what do you think is the roadblock of African Americans being, besides price? I know, like here in South Florida, you know, I'm in Miami-Dade County right now. You're in D.C., and I'm sure you have the problem the same way up there. Our medium family home the housing price for a medium home is $619,000 as of Friday. So you know the prices is out of the box. But what do you think is holding either policy, law, or just general racism is holding back the African American purchase of homes and investing in that home to build generational wealth?
Yeah, I mean, you asked me to skip what I think the primary problem is.
Let's go into the primary problem.
Okay, I do think it's cost. And cost is also related to income, right? If the median black household in 2021 was at $52,000 a year, and in wealth estimates, if you include appreciating aspects, appreciating assets, was at a record level of around 20,000. Well, okay, that's all of your assets. So where can you buy a home with $50,000 annual income and then try to pull together a deposit. And $20,000 median assets is not what you have in the bank. You know, it includes the value of your car. It includes, if you are a homeowner, the value of that. So I think the problem is we don't have a financing structure that allows for lower income or median income people with low wealth to actually get into the housing market, right? And I think you know, what we need is, and there's been some proposals like this, just like the way the majority of whites became homeowners was through, you know, the New Deal, through VA loans, where you can put 0% down, and have more of a securitized loans. We need something like that to allow African Americans to become majority homeowners, and honestly, Latinos to become first time, and Native Americans, and to really get into that space and allow there for a generation or two to build off of that, instead of kind of each of us, you know, barely maintaining and sometimes slipping from generation to generation because we don't even have that basic asset.